Howard Zinn, historian. Howard is hands down one of my favorite people. I'm currently reading SNCC, SNCC, The New Abolitionists, and I swear it's like a love letter. Like his love letter to the SNCC team, to black people, and to everyone involved in the struggle. The author of more than 20 books, he is best known for his powerful memoir, You Can't Be Neutral on a Moving Train, A Personal History of Our Times, and the bestseller, A People's History of the United States, 1492 to present. Okay, on to his interview. Question. In your book, You Can't Be Neutral on a Moving Train, you discuss how we are all susceptible to changing attitudes and beliefs. Can you describe a time when you experienced a change in attitudes and beliefs, and what sparked that change? Howard Zinn. So I went to this demonstration, which was a vaguely communist demonstration. I didn't know, I swear, I didn't know. Please tell everybody I didn't know it was a communist demonstration. At a certain point, a mounted officer attacked this peaceful demonstration, and soon after, I was smacked by a policeman, by either his fist or a club, and I was knocked unconscious. Then when I woke up, now I am over-dramatizing this, the sky cleared. It suddenly occurred to me, police do not attack peaceful demonstrations. After all, we have a Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, and freedom of assembly. But they were attacking all these people. It occurred to me that the government is not neutral. The government is generally on the side of privilege and power, and the Bill of Rights has only as much meaning as whoever has power to enforce it or ignore it. That was a turning point, you might say, from being a liberal to being a radical. A liberal still has some faith in the goodwill of the system. The US really doesn't mean to do ill in Iraq. We all have good intentions. We had good intentions in Vietnam. It was just a mistake, as McNamara would say. A radical says no. The truth is, they do not have good intentions. Their interests are different than that of most people. End quote. Why this passage? First of all, it's so true. All these laws and policies don't mean anything. As in, they don't have any power on their own. They depend wholly on the goodwill of the people with the power to enforce it. Look at Palestine and all the court cases that have found that Israel is breaking international law and committing genocide, and still bombs are being dropped and people are still starving. I think about Kenya and all the protections the Constitution affords us. The president knows, the police know, they don't give one fuck. So we have all these rights, but they're just on paper. Tell Rex Masai and Denzel Omondi and Beasley Kamau, and the countless others that the Constitution defends their right to assemble and protest. These laws are dependent on those in power. Second, people in power are not making mistakes. Every fucked up thing they do is deliberate. And that's a critical thing to remind ourselves. They have different interests and goals, and theirs are the complete opposite of ours. They do not have a single good intention, certainly not when it comes to us. Another key turning point for him happened while he was teaching at Spelman College, a black women's college in Atlanta, USA. Howard Zinn. Sometimes you know something vaguely, but then it is brought home to you powerfully. What was brought home to me powerfully was that you cannot depend on the government or the Constitution if you had some deep grievances with the society. If there's some serious problem in the society, it is not going to be solved by the initiative of the government or by what the law says. It is going to come from what the people themselves do. That came from watching the presumably liberal federal government of Kennedy and Johnson not willing to do anything to enforce the 14th and 15th Amendments of the Constitution until the black people in the South rose up to do it by themselves. They got out and they protested and they went to jail and they got beaten and some of them got killed, and they created a commotion in the nation and in the world that finally caused the government of Kennedy and Johnson to begin to move in the direction of ending racial segregation. For me, this was a lesson in democracy. Democracy is what the people do. It is not what the government does. Democracy is what the people do. It's not what the government does. Question. Could you give us examples of a society today or in history that you believe other societies should emulate? Howard Zinn. I can think of 2 times in history when people created societies that seemed to me worth emulating. One of these was in the few months of the Paris Commune in 1871. For a brief time in 1871, the Paris Commune had something very close to a real democracy. Decisions were made in democratic forums all over Paris, and the members of the Commune, that is, the representatives, the leaders, established that they would get no wage higher than that of the average worker in Paris. Try that with our senators and congressmen. It was a situation where the theater was free, where culture flourished. It was a remarkably democratic society for a few months. I guess too democratic, so it was crushed by the French army coming in from Versailles. The other model is Catalonia in the first months of the Spanish Civil War. If you read George Orwell's Homage to Catalonia, he was in the Spanish Civil War. He describes what happens when the anarchists took over Barcelona. The phrase took over does not exactly fit the idea of anarchists, but anarchism, you might say, flourished in Barcelona for about 6 months in the early years of the Spanish Civil War. Orwell describes how in this remarkably egalitarian society, people shared things, and there was virtually no crime because people had the things they needed or could get the things they needed by exchanging goods and services with other people. It was a peaceful society until the forces from the outside moved in to destroy it. Question. You wrote, I've always resented the smug statements of politicians of how in America, if you worked hard, you would become rich. Many of us believe this. We have always been told that if we work hard, we will succeed. Do you not believe in this ethic of the American dream? Howard Zinn. No, I do not believe in the fantasy. I don't even want to call it a dream, that there is some necessary relationship between how hard you work and how prosperous and successful you are. Sure, there are people who work hard and become successful. Sometimes there is a relationship. Often there isn't. The point is that there is no necessary relationship. A lot also depends on what you consider work. Sometimes people think that the president of the university works 50 times as hard as the janitor at the university. I don't think so. Society does not reward people with material benefits on the basis of how hard they work. A typical CEO in the 60s had an income about 40 times the income of the average American worker. Today it is 400 times. It is ridiculous. How hard does a CEO work? I think of people who are nurses, social workers, elementary or high school teachers. I think of people who work hard, doing very useful things, and they barely have enough money to get by. I think of artists and musicians and actors and poets who have such a hard time in this free market society. The market dooms people like that to a subsistence living. Whether you become prosperous or not does not depend on how hard you work or how smart you are. How do you calculate smartness? Do you go by IQ tests? Some people are smart at things that make a lot of money, and others are smart at things that do not make a lot of money. Certainly, there is no correlation between how prosperous or how materially successful you become and what contribution you make to society. All you have to do is look at the fortunes that are made by the people who produced poisons or nuclear weapons. End quote. Question. How were you so convinced of the mission of World War II enough to leave your family and wife behind, potentially sacrificing your life? What dangers do you see now in this so-called blind faith in a cause? Howard Zinn. I want to answer your question about how to overcome blind loyalty, and it is blind loyalty. You enter the military and you don't think, you do your job. I understand how ordinary people can commit atrocities in warfare. Ordinary guys can go up there, drop bombs, kill women and children. It is just doing your job. You make one judgment at the very beginning of your participation in the war, the judgment that I am on the right side. There is Hitler or Saddam Hussein. Once you make that decision, they are the bad guys, we are the good guys. You don't have to think anymore. No more judgments have to be made, no more considerations. You have already decided everything, and at that point, you can do whatever you want without thinking about it. That is how you get the bombing of civilians in enormous numbers in Dresden, 100,000 dead in Tokyo in one night, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I see this painful scene on television where they talk to a young GI in Iraq. Quote, "Why are you here?" He answers, "Well, I feel that I owe this to my country." And quote, "Really? How do you know you're doing this for your country? You are doing this for your government. There's a difference between your government and your country. There is a difference between your government and your country." Question. In your article, Growing Up Class Conscious, you explained that even when you moved out of a world of just scraping by, never having enough, bringing your children to free medical clinics, even when you received your proper degrees and became a college professor, you never forgot that way of life and you never stopped being class conscious. How do you suggest that those who come from more privileged backgrounds live both socially conscious and socially responsible lives? Story time. Howard Zinn. I suppose my present class consciousness comes at least partly out of my own background, but people with different class backgrounds also are class conscious. So I cannot ask you to rework your background, right? But whoever you are and whatever your background, you're a person of relatively free will. Therefore, you're a person who is capable of looking at the world, at the distribution of wealth, at the distribution of power, and deciding in what way you can intercede and help the situation and help redress the grievances of people in this country who have to work too hard for much too little. I remember a few years ago there was a situation in a factory just north of Boston. Immigrant women workers in a cotton factory, and 10 of them were fired for trying to organize a union because the conditions were absolutely abominable. Well, people from all over the community came to support them. Students at Harvard and other colleges, members of the Teamsters unions, people from churches, it didn't matter what their class background was. They all gathered in one place and demonstrated and walked into the office of the owner of the factory and would not leave until certain demands were met. And so about 13 of us were arrested for refusing to leave. And 4 days later, the employer capitulated and rehired those people who had been fired. But that was an example of people of varying class backgrounds joining in solidarity to do something about economic inequities in society. So I think, yes, that is something everybody can do. Nobody need feel trapped by their money or their parents' money or the jobs that they have. We all have the capacity to break out of whatever restrictions our class status puts us in and do what we think is right.